A woman in the 1950s usually did not begin her morning by checking a fitness app. She did not count steps on a watch. She did not blend a protein shake, scroll through diet advice, or drive across town to a gym before sunrise. Most ordinary women did not talk about wellness routines the way people do now. They were not surrounded by low-carb plans, calorie apps, meal replacement bars, boutique exercise classes, or shelves of powders promising a smaller waist. And yet, when people look back at old family photos from that era, one thing often stands out. Many women looked noticeably slimmer than the average person today. Not all of them, of course. The 1950s were not a perfect health paradise, and appearances could be shaped by pressure, clothing, smoking, and strict beauty expectations. But the pattern still raises a real question. How did so many women stay slimmer without the modern weight loss industry? The answer was not one secret food. It was not a special exercise. It was not because women back then had stronger willpower. A large part of it was that daily life itself was built differently. The house, the kitchen, the neighborhood, the chores, the errands, and the meal schedule all created limits without calling them limits. If you enjoy remembering the old routines that shaped everyday life before everything became so complicated, subscribe and keep a place here. These quiet household systems still have a lot to teach us. The first thing to understand is movement. A 1950s woman may not have gone to a gym, but she often moved through her day in a way that modern life has slowly removed. Her activity was not separated into a workout, it was folded into the normal rhythm of the house. She stood while cooking, she bent down to reach cabinets, she carried laundry baskets, she swept floors, she scrubbed sinks, she made beds, she walked from room to room putting things back where they belonged. She may have hung clothes on a line, carried groceries from the store, polished furniture, washed dishes by hand, or cleaned a bathroom. Without a cabinet full of sprays that promised to do the work for her. None of this looked like exercise. No one called it training. But the body does not only count movement when a person is wearing sneakers. A body uses energy when a woman is on her feet for hours, lifting, reaching, walking, folding, wiping, stirring, and carrying. That was one of the quiet differences. Today, a person can spend an entire day barely moving and still feel exhausted. They can sit at a desk, drive to the store, order dinner from a phone, watch hours of television, and use machines for nearly every small household task. The mind may be tired, but the body may have done very little. That was much harder in the 1950s. For many women, the day began with work before breakfast was even finished. Beds had to be made, children had to be dressed, breakfast dishes had to be cleared. Floors needed attention because dust and dirt were more visible in homes without all the modern conveniences. Laundry was not always a simple button press. Even when washing machines were available, the work around laundry still took time. Sorting, hanging, folding, ironing, putting away. And ironing mattered more than people remember. Clothes were often made from fabrics that wrinkled easily. A dress, blouse, apron, or shirt might need pressing before it looked presentable. That meant standing, lifting, smoothing, turning, and repeating. Again, it was not called exercise. It was just what had to be done. The neighborhood also created movement. Many families had one car, and some women did not have a car available during the day. A nearby store, school, church, neighbor's house, or post office could mean walking. Not a special walk for fitness, just walking because that was how the errand got done. That kind of movement adds up quietly. One short walk to the store, a few trips up and down the stairs, an hour on the feet in the kitchen. A laundry basket carried outside. A floor swept after lunch. A child followed from one room to another. A table set, cleared, wiped, and reset later in the day. No single action seems dramatic. But together they formed a life where the body was asked to participate all day long. Modern life often does the opposite. It saves steps everywhere. The garage connects to the house. The car takes us to the door. Groceries arrive on the porch. Dinner arrives in a bag. The remote control saves a walk across the room. The dishwasher saves time at the sink. The dryer replaces the clothesline. The phone replaces errands that once required shoes, a coat, and a walk outside. Many of these changes are helpful. No one should pretend that scrubbing floors and carrying heavy baskets all day was easy or fair. A lot of women were tired. Many had fewer choices than women have now. The point is not that every old burden should return. The point is that when those burdens disappeared, the movement disappeared with them, and that changed the body. A woman in the 1950s could burn energy without ever thinking about burning energy. Her day asked for motion before she had time to plan it. Modern life often asks people to sit still, then expects them to make up for it with a scheduled workout later. That is a much harder bargain. This is why the old photos can be misleading if we only look at the dresses, the hairstyles, and the tiny waists. Behind those photos was a whole daily system. The body was shaped not only by what women ate, but by how often they stood, walked, lifted, cleaned, cooked, carried, and repeated the same ordinary tasks. And once you see that, the next question becomes even more important, because movement was only one side of the old rhythm. The other side was waiting at the table, in the pantry, and behind the kitchen door, where food had rules that most families never had to write down. One of the biggest differences between the 1950s and today was not only what people ate, it was when they ate. For many families, food had a schedule. Breakfast happened in the morning, lunch happened around the middle of the day, supper happened in the evening. There might be coffee, a small dessert, or an occasional treat, but the kitchen was not treated like an all-day grazing station. That one difference matters more than people realize. A 1950s woman was not usually surrounded by snacks from the moment she woke up until the moment she went to bed. There were not giant bags of chips sitting open on the counter, protein bars in every purse, sweet coffee drinks on every corner, or delivery apps waiting on a phone. Food existed, of course, but it usually required a little planning, a little preparation, and a reason to serve it. The day had food boundaries. That did not mean everyone ate perfectly. Plenty of 1950s meals included sugar, white bread, butter, casseroles, pies, fried foods, and processed items that were becoming more common. This was not a world of flawless nutrition, but eating still had more structure around it. A person was less likely to drift from snack to snack all day without noticing. The table mattered. Breakfast might be simple: eggs, toast, oatmeal, fruit, coffee, or whatever the family usually kept on hand. Lunch might be leftovers, soup, a sandwich, or something prepared from the refrigerator. Supper was often the main event, with meat stretched carefully, vegetables served in some form, potatoes, rice, bread, or a casserole built to feed everyone at once. The important part was not that every meal was perfect, it was that meals were events. They had a beginning and an end. Today, eating often leaks into every part of the day. A person may eat in the car, at the desk, on the couch, while scrolling a phone, while watching a show, or while standing in the kitchen without even using a plate. The body receives calories, but the mind barely registers a meal. That was less common in a home where food was prepared, served, cleared, and put away. A woman in the 1950s often had to think about food in advance. She might plan meals around what was already in the icebox or refrigerator, what could be stretched for another day, what the butcher had, what was affordable, and what would feed the family without waste. A grocery list was not just a modern organizational tool, it was part of how a household stayed within its means. When food had to be planned, cooked, served, and cleaned up after, it was harder to eat casually every 15 minutes. That is a powerful hidden limit. Even dessert had a different place in the rhythm. A cake, pie, pudding, or cookies might appear after supper or for a special visit, but dessert was usually connected to a meal, a guest, a Sunday dinner, or a family occasion. It was not always something eaten alone in handfuls from a package while standing in front of a cabinet. The package itself changed modern eating. Modern snack foods are designed to be opened quickly, eaten quickly, and kept within arm's reach. They require almost no pause. In the 1950s, many foods still demanded more steps. Even a treat often had to be baked, sliced, served, or shared. That gave the body time to notice. There is also the matter of portions. Plates, glasses, restaurant servings, and packaged foods were often smaller than what people see now. Une bouteille de soda n'avait pas la taille d'un petit seau. Un repas au restaurant n'était pas toujours assez copieux pour nourrir 2 personnes. Un café n'était pas un dessert dans une tasse. Et à la maison, le repas était souvent servi à partir de ce qui avait été cuisiné pour la famille et non d'un flux incessant d'options supplémentaires. Une assiette plus petite ne semble pas être un outil de perte de poids spectaculaire, mais elle change ce qui semble normal. Quand l'assiette est modeste, la portion semble complète. Quand le verre est plus petit, on a l'impression d'avoir fini de boire plus tôt. Lorsqu'il y a moins d'aliments supplémentaires sur la table, il y a moins de décisions à prendre. De nombreuses femmes des années 50 ne mesuraient pas leurs portions. Elles vivaient dans un monde où les portions n'avaient pas encore atteint les tailles que les gens considèrent aujourd'hui comme ordinaires. That is why the phrase "without diets" matters. They were not necessarily avoiding excess through a formal plan. Their surroundings made excess less automatic. The kitchen itself often had a closing time. After supper, dishes were washed, leftovers were covered, counters were wiped, and the room was put back into order. Once that was done, the kitchen felt finished for the night. Do you remember a home where the kitchen closed after dinner? Where the dishes were done, the light was turned off, and food was simply not part of the evening anymore. That kind of boundary is easy to lose. Today, the kitchen can stay open until midnight. A person can wander in during a commercial break, open the refrigerator, check the pantry, pour something sweet, heat something frozen, or order something without even standing up for long. The old rhythm had a kind of firmness, not harshness necessarily, just a sense that meals belonged in their place. That firmness helped women stay slimmer because it reduced the number of eating moments in the day. Weight does not only respond to one meal, it responds to repeated chances to eat. When those chances are everywhere, the body is asked to handle more food than it needs. When those chances are limited, eating becomes more intentional without requiring a person to fight temptation all day. There was also less advertising inside the home. A woman might see food ads in magazines or on television, but she was not carrying a glowing screen that reminded her of fast food, snacks, recipes, and cravings from morning until night. Modern hunger is not always hunger. Sometimes it is suggestion, a picture, a smell, a notification, a drive-through sign, a discount, a late-night craving made convenient. The 1950s home had temptations, but they did not follow a person as closely. Again, this does not mean the decade was ideal. Some women were under strong pressure to stay thin. Some skipped meals, some smoked cigarettes, which can suppress appetite but carries serious health risks. Some lived with unfair expectations around beauty, marriage, and appearance. Those parts should not be romanticized. But the practical system still matters. Regular meals, less constant snacking, smaller portions, more home cooking, food that required preparation, a kitchen that closed, a table that gave eating a beginning and an end. Those were not diet rules written on a chart. They were household rhythms, and once those rhythms were gone, people did not just gain freedom. They gained constant access. Food became easier, faster, larger, sweeter, more portable, and more available at every hour. That is a very different world for the human body. So when people ask why 1950s women were slimmer without diets or gyms, the answer begins to take shape. They moved more because life required it. They ate with more boundaries because the kitchen had a rhythm. And even when they wanted food, it usually took more effort to get from hunger to eating. That effort may be the most forgotten part of all, because modern convenience did not only save time, it quietly removed the small delays that once protected people from excess. One reason 1950s women were often slimmer is almost too ordinary to notice. Life made them work before it made things easy. Not work in the glamorous sense, not exercise with a name, not a carefully planned fitness routine with music, shoes, and a timer. It was the plain physical work of keeping a household moving. The kind of work that rarely showed up in photographs because it happened before the photo was taken. A clean blouse did not arrive from a dryer already soft and ready to wear. A floor did not shine because a robot passed over it while everyone slept. Dinner did not appear because someone tapped a screen. A tidy room did not reset itself. Someone had to do it. And in many 1950s homes, that someone was a woman moving from task to task all day long. Laundry alone could fill a large part of the week. Even when a family had a washing machine, the work around it was still physical. Clothes had to be sorted, lifted, wrung out in some homes, carried outside, pinned to a line, brought back in, folded, ironed, and put away. Sheets were heavier when wet, towels took effort. Children's clothes multiplied quickly. A clothesline was not just a charming backyard detail, it was movement. Each shirt meant bending into the basket, lifting it up, shaking it out, reaching for the line, pinning it, and moving along to the next piece. Then the whole process happened again in reverse. No one called that a workout, but the shoulders, arms, back, legs, and hands were involved. The same was true in the kitchen. Cooking from basic ingredients required standing time. A woman might peel potatoes, chop onions, trim meat, mix batter, stir a pot, knead dough, wash lettuce, set the table, clear the table, wash dishes, dry dishes, and put them away. The meal was not only the eating, it was the labor around the eating. That labor created a natural pause. If a person wanted food, there were often steps between wanting and eating. You had to prepare something. You had to use a plate. You had to clean up afterward. Even a simple snack could require more effort than opening a package and eating straight from a bag. That effort mattered. Modern convenience removed many of those pauses. Food can now arrive hot without anyone chopping, cooking, serving, or washing a pan. A frozen meal can be ready in minutes. Snacks are made to be eaten with one hand. Drinks can contain hundreds of calories and still feel like a casual sip between errands. The body receives the result, but the work around the result is gone. This is one of the hidden changes that shaped modern weight. People often focus only on calories, but they forget the work that used to surround calories. Preparing food burned a little energy. Walking to buy food burned a little energy. Cleaning up after food burned a little energy. Waiting for food slowed the decision down. Convenience removed the effort and kept the eating. House cleaning worked the same way. Une femme des années 1950 pourrait balayer au lieu de pousser un aspirateur sans fil léger dans une pièce en quelques minutes. Elle pourrait frotter une baignoire à la main. Elle pourrait épousseter les meubles pièce par pièce. Elle pourrait secouer des tapis à l'extérieur, cirer des chaussures, battre des coussins, laver les vitres, passer la serpillière avec un seau et transporter des fournitures de pièce en pièce. Encore une fois, rien de tout cela ne devrait être trop romancé. De nombreuses femmes étaient épuisées. Certaines avaient peu d'aide. On s'attendait à ce que certaines gardent une maison impeccable comme si ce travail ne coûtait ni temps ni force. Le travail domestique pouvait être invisible, répétitif et injustement placé sur les épaules des femmes. Mais le corps devait quand même le traverser. Les maisons modernes regorgent d'appareils qui économisent l'effort. Dishwashers, dryers, lightweight vacuums, prepared foods, online shopping, remote controls. Escalators, elevators, automatic doors, delivery services, and entertainment systems all remove little movements from the day. Each convenience feels small. One less trip to the store, one less walk to the television, one less basket carried outside, one less hour at the sink, one less meal cooked from the beginning, one less errand done on foot, one less reason to leave the chair. But the body feels the total. The trouble is that modern life often removes effort from the day, then sells effort back as exercise. A person sits for hours, drives everywhere, orders food, uses machines for chores, and then feels guilty for not finding time to work out. The movement that once lived inside ordinary life has been pulled out and placed in a separate box called fitness. That makes staying slim harder, not because people today are weak, because the system is different. A 1950s woman might spend an entire day doing small physical actions. A modern person may need to schedule those same actions on purpose. Walking has to become a habit. Standing has to become a choice. Cooking has to become a plan. Cleaning has to fit around work. Movement has to be protected from a world built to remove it. There is another difference. Delay. Inconvenience created delay, and delay can reduce impulse. When a cake had to be baked, when leftovers had to be reheated on the stove, when popcorn had to be made in a pot, when a trip to the store required walking or driving and spending real household money, eating had more friction around it. That friction gave a person time to change their mind. Today, desire and consumption can be almost instant. Hungry? Tap. Bored? Open the pantry. Tired? Drive through. Restless? Sweet drink. Watching television? Family-size bag on the couch. No dishes, no table, no waiting, no real pause. The old household had more stops built into it. Even leisure was different. A woman might sit, of course. She might listen to the radio, read a magazine, sew, mend, write letters, talk with a neighbor, or watch television as the decade went on. But screens had not yet spread into every room, every pocket, and every spare minute. Evening entertainment did not follow people from the couch to the bed to the breakfast table. That mattered because boredom used to be less edible. Today, food often fills empty moments. A snack can become entertainment. A drink can become comfort. A delivery order can become something to look forward to after a hard day. When life is stressful and convenience is everywhere, the easiest comfort is usually the one that requires the least movement. A 1950s woman had stress too, often plenty of it. But the path from stress to food was not always so quick, so large, or so heavily advertised. This is why the old system worked even without being called a system. The daily chores created movement. The kitchen created effort. The stores created limits. The lack of instant access created delay. The house itself asked the body to keep participating. Was that always fair looking back? No. Was it always healthy? No. Did it come with pressures modern women are right to question? Absolutely. But when people ask why women were often slimmer then, it is impossible to ignore the physical reality of the day. Their world required more steps, more standing, more carrying, more making, more cleaning, and more waiting. Modern convenience gave people back time. That is a real gift. But it also took away many of the small efforts that helped regulate the body without anyone naming them. And once those small efforts disappeared, the body was left in a strange position. Surrounded by more food, asked to move less, and then blamed for responding exactly as a human body responds. That is where the story becomes more than chores and calories. Because daily life in the 1950s also had social rhythms that shaped how women dressed, when they ate, how they appeared in public, and how often they were seen by other people. The body was not only living inside a house, it was living inside expectations. There was one more force shaping the 1950s woman's body, and it was not found in a diet book. It was the rhythm of being seen. A woman in that era often moved through a world where appearance was part of daily life, in a much stricter way than it is for many people now. She might dress before breakfast was fully cleared. She might put on a house dress, fix her hair, add lipstick, tie on an apron, and begin the day with a sense that she should be ready if someone knocked on the door. That pressure could be heavy. It was not always kind. Women were judged harshly for their bodies, their clothes, their housekeeping, their manners, and even the way their children looked in public. So this should not be praised as if it were harmless. But it did shape behavior. When a woman expected to see neighbors, shopkeepers, school staff, church friends, relatives, or visitors, the day felt more public. Even ordinary errands had a social quality. Going to the grocer, walking a child to school, answering the door, attending church, or speaking with a neighbor across the fence all carried a quiet reminder. People noticed. That kind of social rhythm affected how women dressed, how they carried themselves, and sometimes how they ate. Le vêtement jouait aussi un rôle. Beaucoup de femmes portaient des robes, des jupes, des chemisiers ajustés, des sous-vêtements structurés, des ceintures, des jupons et des chaussures qui rendèrent le corps plus présent à celles qui les portaient. Ces vêtements n'étaient pas toujours confortables et pouvaient être restrictifs. mais il créait un retour d'information. Une taille serrée disait vite la vérité. Une robe ajustée ne cachait pas les changements aussi facilement qu'un pantalon extensible. Une ceinture, un chemisier rentré ou une jupe structurée rappelaient à une femme sa silhouette tout au long de la journée. Les vêtements modernes sont souvent bien plus confortables, et ce n'est pas une mauvaise chose. Les tissus extensibles, les vêtements d'intérieur amples, les tailles élastiques et les chemises oversize offrent une liberté que les femmes d'autrefois n'avaient souvent pas. But they also remove some of the physical signals clothing once gave. A person can gain weight today and not feel it in their clothes for a long time. In the 1950s, a woman's clothing often made small changes harder to ignore. That does not mean the clothing was better. It means it acted like another limit. And the 1950s were full of limits. There were fewer restaurant meals, fewer fast food stops, fewer giant drinks, fewer snack choices, fewer television hours, fewer processed foods in every cabinet, fewer ways to eat privately, constantly and casually without anyone seeing it. Choice was smaller. That can sound negative because choice is usually presented as freedom, and in many ways, it is. Modern people have more options, more comfort, more medical knowledge, more independence, and more ways to shape their own lives. Those are real gains, but too much choice can also become tiring. When every store aisle is full of tempting packages, when every phone screen can show food, when every craving can be answered quickly, when every evening offers endless entertainment and endless snacking, the body has to rely on willpower again and again. The 1950s woman often did not need to say no as many times because the offer was not always there. That may be the most important difference. Modern life asks people to make hundreds of food and movement decisions that earlier women never had to make. Should I order dessert? Should I skip the drive-thru? Should I get the large drink? Should I snack while watching? Should I sit for another hour? Should I take the elevator? Should I cook or order? Should I open the pantry even though I am not hungry? The old rhythm removed many of those questions before they appeared. There was food in the house, but not endless, ready-to-eat food. There were meals, but not constant grazing. There was entertainment, but not a screen that could keep a person sitting for half the night. There was comfort, but it usually required more work to get. Was it really discipline, or was the whole house built around limits? That question changes the way we see those old photographs. The woman in the fitted dress was not simply a symbol of self-control. She was living inside a structure that made certain behaviors normal and others less convenient. She walked more because errands required it. She stood more because the house required it. She cooked more because food required it. She snacked less because snacks were not everywhere. She ate smaller portions because portions were smaller. She had fewer eating windows because meals had a schedule. She noticed her body because clothing gave feedback. That is not a miracle. It is a system. But there is also a darker side that should not be ignored. Some women stayed thin because they were under intense pressure. Some smoked cigarettes because it was common and socially accepted. And smoking can suppress appetite while damaging health in serious ways. Some were told their worth depended on beauty, marriage, waist size, and pleasing others. Some had little freedom to reject those expectations. That part of the story is not wisdom. It is pressure, so the lesson is not to copy the 1950s exactly. The lesson is to separate what helped from what harmed. The helpful part was rhythm, a day with more ordinary movement, a kitchen with clearer boundaries, meals eaten at the table, fewer snacks within reach, more cooking, smaller portions, less sitting, more walking, clothing that made the body harder to ignore. A home where food was not the answer to every bored, tired, lonely, or restless moment. Those are not extreme ideas. They are simple ones. And maybe that is why they are easy to overlook. Modern weight advice often sounds complicated because modern life is complicated. People are told to track, measure, optimize, restrict, burn, count, and fix themselves. But many 1950s women were not slim because they had a perfect plan. They were living in a daily pattern that made balance easier to keep. The body responds to the pattern. If the pattern is movement, meals, limits, and pauses, the body receives one message. If the pattern is sitting, snacking, stress, screens, and instant access, the body receives another. That does not mean every person's weight is simple. Age, hormones, medication, illness, income, sleep, genetics, stress, and work schedules all matter. No one should be shamed for living in a world designed to make sitting and eating easier than moving and stopping. But the old rhythm still gives us something useful to think about. Maybe the question is not how to copy a 1950s woman. Maybe the question is which small limits are worth bringing back. A real meal instead of constant bites. A walk for a short errand. A kitchen that closes after dinner. A smaller plate. A little more cooking. A few chores done by hand. Less food kept within arm's reach. An evening that does not turn every tired feeling into a snack. Which part of this old rhythm would be hardest to bring back today? For some people, it would be walking more. For others, it would be closing the kitchen. For others, it would be giving up the habit of eating in front of a screen. But even one small boundary can change the feel of a day. That is what the 1950s understood, even if they did not describe it that way. Slimness was not built only in the mirror. It was built in the walk to the store, the laundry line, the cooking pot, the grocery list. The smaller glass, the cleared table, and the quiet moment when the kitchen light was turned off after supper. If old household wisdom still matters to you, subscribe before you leave. There are many more forgotten routines worth remembering, not because the past was perfect, but because some of its simple habits still make sense. A woman wiping the counter after dinner may not have thought she was doing anything related to weight. She was just finishing the day properly. The plates were washed. The leftovers were put away, the table was clear, the room was settled, and once the kitchen was closed, the body understood something modern life has almost forgotten. The day had an end.